I'm making this video as a request from one of my subscribers, actually a friend of mine who's also a subscriber. Um, a group of ladies that I quilt with. I'm helping a couple of them with their knitting. One of them I actually taught to knit, and the other one just had some questions. And so she's working on a little baby sweater, and the directions say, weave the shoulder seams together. And she says, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that. I said, well, I could show you how to do it the way I do it. That is rather straightforward. Takes a little time to do it, but it's a little more straightforward than most people do what's called a Kitchener stitch. So she didn't have the extra yarn that we needed to do it, so I'm doing this video for her. By the way, she's right-handed, and I still work with her knitting. I'm trying to teach her how to continental knit, and maybe we'll get there someday. Anyway, so what we have is 2 swatches of fabric here. Oh, and by the way, if you have some of these double-pointed needles and you need a little short needle, just slip a tip on it. A point protector is what they're called, and you have a nice little short needle. So our 2 pieces of swatch knitting, there's 20 stitches on each one of these, but what we want to do is we want to weave them together in such a way that it looks like they have been knitted in one piece. Okay, there is a method of doing this, but I always get confused. I forget whether I'm supposed to go over the bar or under the bar, and it can be done, okay, but it can be very confusing for somebody that is new to knitting or has never done this technique. So I was thinking about it one day, and I said, you know what? All I'm trying to do when I make that weaving in is I'm trying to make a row of knitting using a piece of yarn and my yarn needle, and I'm doing it by hand instead of with my knitting needles. I said, you know, if I took some scrap yarn and I knitted that row, then I could use my yarn here and I could follow that scrap yarn, and I would have an exact duplicate of the next row I'm supposed to knit. I tried it. It worked out beautifully. Have always done that ever since. So what we need to do first is we need to decide how much yarn we are going to need to make that row of stitching here. Normally when I do this, I try to start this weaving by finishing my knitting on the same side. In other words, right side or wrong side. I obviously finish these both on the wrong side because my next row, because I'm a lefty, will start here and it'll be a knit row. Just make sure that they're the same row. It's not so important with the stockinette, but if you have a pattern here, it does make a difference. You can even use this with garter stitch. If you get confused about putting 2 pieces of the 2 ends of a garter stitch together, if you finish them both on the same side and your next row will be the other side on both of them, it'll work together beautifully. Anyway, let's look at what we need to do. We need to find a high contrast yarn. Nothing even close. So I have a little bit of green here. Oh, I forgot. We have to cut it first. So the way you decide how much you need, I have 20 stitches here. If you just take and loosely wrap your yarn around 1 wrap for every stitch, that's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then add a little extra so you'll have enough to work with, and then give it a clip. You don't want to cut yourself short. It's really infuriating to be putting these two together and finding that you run out of yarn. So that's approximately 4 times the distance here, plus another foot or so, okay? Now, you just simply pick up your yarn, your contrasting yarn. Okay, we've cut that loose. Pick up your contrasting yarn and your needle, and we're just going to knit another row. I don't even bother tying a knot or anything because we're going to take this out. Just leave enough of a tail so you can find it, and we're just going to knit that row rather quickly. It's only 20 stitches. I'll finish this and be right back. Alright, I finished the last stitch on that row, and I'm knitting it fairly loosely. I want to give it myself at least a couple of rows, and then I'm going to bind this off. I'm going to purl the next side. And most people have trouble with purl, but as far as I'm concerned, purling in continental is just as easy as knitting. And I'll finish this and be right back. Alright, with 2 rows on there, you can really see where that, here, I'll try to hold it up, where the green yarn comes underneath here. That's what we're going to mimic when we add that extra row. Now, for my convenience, I'm just going to drop, bind these stitches off. They don't have to be neat. They just have to be bound off because we're going to release them later. And I will sit here and bind off. And there's 20 stitches. Now, it may seem like it's taking a lot of time to do this, but we knit for pleasure. We want it to look good. It's also possible you can just put this on a length of yarn or a stitch holder, but you want it to be able to stretch it out so you can see what you're doing very well. So I'll finish this bind off and be right back. Okay, we have the green on here. Now, we need to do the same thing to the other side. On the other side, we don't need to leave a tail. I'm just going to cut it to make it easier for me to work with. Oops. Okay, and I have another yarn. They don't have to be different colors. I'm just using a different color because it's just easier for me. If I can find the end, there we go. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one. I'm going to do 2 rows, and then I'm going to bind it off, and I'll be right back. I have all of my prep work done, and now it's time to start putting these 2 pieces together. We need a nice blunt needle. I have it threaded, and I've taken the time to work my tails into the back so that they won't get in my way during this demonstration. Okay, the first thing, we're starting on this side. That's where our tail is, and we need to move our yarn to the other side, and we'll find the first place that our thread went through, which is right here. Slip your needle through. Then we're going to go to the other side and find our stitch here. And we can see the first place we went through here was right there. You can see you can actually see that yarn there. We're following that green yarn, not our purple yarn, the green yarn. Okay, we're going to come back over to the other side, and we're going to find out where our next one goes. You can see this one here. You can see where we already stitched. This one here, it goes right around underneath there. We're going to try to pull these stitches so that they look pretty much like our knitted stitches. Okay, the next one here, we've already got something through there. Now we want to come through here, and we pull it up gently, not too tight, not too loose. Back to the pink, back to the green. And if you look at it closely, what we're doing is we're picking up a leg from one stitch and a leg from the next stitch. Gently pull it. Anyway, and you can see here that if you ignore the little bit of yarn that's peeking through, we're knitting. So back to the pink. Be sure that you only pick up the legs, that you don't pick up a leg of the stitch that's below it. Okay, and we just keep going all the way across. Now, I'm going to work this, and my editor will probably fast forward it for me. And you can see how this goes together. Very gently, we're going to work those stitches so that they pretty well, and if you get one that you think is a little big, just give it a tug. That looks better. And work it all the way across. We only have 20 stitches here, so it won't take us very long. All right, we're finished. Now, as you can see, both pieces are together, and we can check ourselves, making sure that our stitches are finishing themselves. You can see that they finish themselves very nicely. Okay, well, we've got this funny yarn on the back side, and we need to remove it. So I'm going to pull these out here where I tacked them on the back side to get them out of our way. Now, I'm just going to release it. Now, if you had put these on a stitch holder or a piece of yarn, you just pull the piece of yarn out. And that's simple. Okay, I'll go to the other side. Flip it. Did I catch all of those stitches? I don't have any funny stitches sticking up here. There we go. Looks like it's all knitted in one piece. I got it fairly even. And there we go. Not exactly Kitchener, but it works. And if you're new to knitting and you're a little baffled by Kitchener, which I think most people are, this is one way of doing it that gets you the same results. Now it's just a matter of finishing your sweater or whatever you're knitting. If you like this video and it's been helpful, maybe write me a comment, ask me a question. This is a little more involved than the Kitchener stitch done directly from your knitting needles. But if you're like me, sometimes I have to see it exactly to know exactly what I'm doing. And this method works well for me. And in most cases where you're going to weave a seam like this, it'll be a shoulder seam. There won't be very many stitches to work with, just a handful. Anyway, I hope you like this. Like and subscribe. Thank you.